I was rinsing a coffee mug in my Charlotte condo when the intercom buzzed twice sharp impatient like whoever pressed it already knew I'd answer. The screen lit up. My parents stood in the lobby, side by side, matching smiles. A leather folder tucked under my father's arm like a weapon he'd polished on the drive down. That was the exact second something in me went cold. 13 years ago, they closed a door and told me to figure it out. Tonight, they were back because the door I built turned out to be expensive. If you've ever had family treat you like you don't matter, like you're only valuable when you're useful, tap the like button, subscribe, and stay with me, because what they asked for next wasn't forgiveness. It was a bill, and they expected me to pay it. I pressed the button and let them up. They walked in like the place belonged to them. My mother, Diane, drifted straight to the kitchen island, fingers brushing the stone, nodding to herself. Approval. My father, Frank, didn't bother saying hello. He went to the windows, hands in his pockets, staring out at the city lights, like he was measuring the view. Neither asked how I was. My mother spoke first. "You look thin." I didn't answer. Frank set the folder on my dining table and opened it with a practiced motion. Inside were glossy printouts, venue photos, linen samples, a seating chart mock-up with names I didn't recognize. "Kayla's wedding," he said. "It's coming up fast." My sister's name landed in the room like a dropped plate, sharp, loud, familiar. Diane slid a single page toward me, numbers circled in red, dates underlined. Her voice softened the way it always did when she wanted something. "There's a gap. 48,500. We thought, given how well you're doing now." She didn't finish the sentence. She never did. She preferred letting guilt do the talking. I looked at the paper, then at them. "You drove 3 hours," I said, "to ask me for money." Frank finally turned around. "We're asking you to help your family." There it was. The word they only used when it benefited them. I laughed. "Once," a short sound that surprised even me. Diane flinched. "What's so funny?" I set the page back on the table, perfectly aligned. "You don't get to say that word in my house." Frank's jaw tightened. "Don't start. Don't start," I echoed. "You showed up uninvited with invoices." Diane clasped her hands together. "Rachel, sweetheart, this isn't about the past. This is about Kayla's future. My future had once been a hospital room that smelled like disinfectant and fear. They hadn't liked talking about that either." Frank leaned forward, elbows on the table. His voice dropped into what he probably thought was reasonable. Calm, fatherly. "You're stable now. You have a good job, no kids, no responsibilities like your sister does. This is a chance to make things right. Make things right." The dishwasher clicked on behind me. A low hum filled the silence. I felt my fingers curl into the sleeve of my sweater, twisting the fabric tight around my hand. "Get out," I said. Diane blinked. "Excuse me." I said, "Get out." Frank smiled thin and humorless. "You don't mean that." "I do." They sat there for a second longer, waiting for me to crack, for the old reflex to kick in, the one that made me apologize, even when I'd done nothing wrong. It didn't. Frank stood slowly. "We didn't raise you to be this cold." "No," I said. "You trained me." Diane grabbed her purse as if it might save her. "You're overreacting." "Out," I said again, and this time my voice didn't shake. They left with the folder tucked back under Frank's arm. Diane paused at the door hand on the frame, eyes glossy. "I hope you can live with this," she said. The door closed behind them. The lock clicked. The sound echoed. I stood there long after they were gone, heart-steady breath even waiting for the guilt to hit. It didn't. What hit instead was memory. I was 20 when my kidneys started failing. No warning, no dramatic collapse, just exhaustion that wouldn't lift. Swelling in my ankles. Blood work that made the nurse's face go careful and polite. The doctor used phrases like end stage and immediate intervention. He talked about dialysis schedules and transplant lists like he was reading a grocery receipt. I went home and told my parents. Frank asked how much it would cost. I told him. He sat at the kitchen table silent, then pulled out a notebook. He wrote numbers down, crossed some out, did the math out loud like it was neutral, like it wasn't my life. Diane stared at the counter. She didn't look at me once. Kayla was 17 then. Dance competitions, college tours, senior photos booked months in advance. Frank said, "We can't drain everything." I said I need this to live. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. Your sister is at a critical stage. Scholarships, opportunities. "We can't jeopardize that," Diane added softly. "You're strong. You've always been strong." That was the day strength became a sentence. They helped me apply for assistance programs, printed forms, drove me to one appointment. Then they stopped. When dialysis started, I went alone. When I was added to the transplant list, they sent a text. No emojis, no follow-up. My Aunt Marjorie sold her shop. My Uncle Ben took a loan against his retirement. They sat with me during treatments, held my bag when I threw up, learned the names of my nurses. My parents sent a card. Blank inside. Recovery was slow, painful, quiet. I learned how to survive without expecting anything from the people who taught me how to speak. I built my life carefully after that. Certifications, late nights, jobs I didn't love until they paid me enough to leave. I didn't post about it, didn't brag. The first time my name showed up in a company-wide email, I forwarded it to Marjorie, and that was it. Apparently, that was enough. The dishwasher finished its cycle with a hollow thunk. I leaned against the counter and closed my eyes. My phone buzzed. A message from Diane. Already. We didn't come all this way to be treated like strangers. I typed back with one thumb. You made us strangers a long time ago. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Kayla is counting on you, she wrote. Don't punish her for mistakes we made. Mistakes. I set the phone face down on the counter and watched the screen go dark. Outside, the city kept moving. Traffic lights changed. Someone laughed on a balcony across the way. Life uninterrupted. I poured the rest of my coffee down the sink. The steam rose, then vanished. Somewhere in the building, an elevator chimed, and in the quiet that followed, I realized something else had snapped, not loudly, not dramatically, but cleanly. The part of me that still hoped they'd choose differently was finally gone. I didn't tell anyone the first time my hands shook so badly I couldn't turn the key in my car. I sat in the parking lot outside the clinic, engine running, radio off, staring at the steering wheel while my fingers trembled like they belonged to someone else. I told myself it was caffeine, stress, anything but fear. Fear had a way of multiplying once you named it. By the 3rd appointment, the doctor stopped pretending it was temporary. He angled the screen toward me and spoke carefully the way people do when they already know how the story ends. Your kidney function is dropping faster than expected. I nodded like I understood, like this was a spreadsheet problem I could solve. You'll need to prepare for dialysis, he continued, and we should start transplant evaluations. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic and burnt coffee. A wall clock ticked too loud. I counted each second and thought about how strange it was that time kept moving, even when your body started quitting on you. I drove straight to my parents' house. Frank was at the kitchen table with his laptop open, receipts spread out like he was running a business instead of a family. Diane stood at the counter chopping vegetables she never cooked. I told them everything, slowly, clearly. I didn't cry, I didn't raise my voice. Frank asked one question. What's the number? I gave it to him. He wrote it down. Then he flipped to a fresh page and started subtracting. Dialysis will be covered partially, he said. But the transplant, if it happens, that's different. If it happens. Diane finally turned around. Her eyes went glassy in that familiar way. How long can you wait? The doctor's words echoed in my head. Not long, not safely. Frank leaned back in his chair and folded his arms. We have options. That was the first lie. He pulled out another folder. Not medical. Financial. Kayla's name was on the tab. Dance intensives. Private coaching. College application consultants. A non-refundable deposit for a showcase in Atlanta. Another in New York. She's being noticed, Frank said. This is a critical year. I stared at the papers. The numbers. The future they had already decided mattered more. I need this, I said. My voice came out flat. I will die without it. Frank didn't flinch. That's dramatic. Diane winced, but she didn't correct him. We're not saying no, Frank added. We're saying not everything. I waited for Diane to say something. Anything. She wiped her hands on a towel and spoke without meeting my eyes. "You've always landed on your feet, Rachel." There it was again, strength repackaged as an excuse. "I'm asking you," I said. "I'm not negotiating." Frank closed the folder. The sound was final. "You're 20. You can apply for assistance, loans, programs. You want me to go into debt to stay alive. I want you to be realistic." Diane stepped closer, touched my arm, then pulled back like I was contagious. "Your sister's future can't be derailed." I remember thinking how calm the room felt. No yelling, no slammed doors, just a quiet agreement being reached without me. I left without another word. Dialysis started 3 weeks later. 3 mornings a week, 4 hours at a time. The machine beeped if I moved too much. The chair smelled like disinfectant and sweat. I learned which nurses talked too much and which ones understood silence. My parents came once. Frank sat for 15 minutes, checked his watch twice, and said he had a meeting. Diane kissed my forehead like I was a child with the flu. They never came again. Kayla texted selfies from competitions, costumes, medals, "miss you" with a heart emoji. I stopped replying. When the transplant list paperwork came, it asked about family donors. I brought it up one last time. Frank didn't even pretend to consider it. "We're not doing that." "Not even testing?" I asked. He shook his head. "Unnecessary risk," Diane added. "We can't afford complications." I laughed then, a thin, ugly sound. I am the complication. That was the night I called Marjorie. She didn't ask questions. She didn't tell me to stay positive. She told me to pack a bag and come stay with her. Ben drove me to appointments. Marjorie learned medical terms so she could argue with billing offices. When I got the call that a match was possible, not guaranteed, just possible, she cried in the parking lot and hugged me like she was afraid I'd disappear if she let go. The surgery date came together fast. Too fast for my parents, apparently. Frank sent a text the morning of. "Thinking of you." No signature. No call. I woke up in recovery with my throat raw and a pain that felt like fire and pressure all at once. Marjorie was there. Ben was there. A nurse told me the surgery went well. No one else came. Recovery was brutal. Medications that made my hands shake. Nights I slept sitting up because lying flat made me nauseous. I learned to walk again slowly, carefully, counting steps like they mattered. When I went back to my parents' house to pick up the rest of my things, Kayla's trophies lined the hallway. New ones, shiny. My old room had become storage. Frank stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "You're better now." It wasn't a question. "I survived," I said. He nodded like that proved his point. See? That was the moment something hardened inside me. Not anger, something colder. I moved out the next week. Years passed. I built a life piece by piece. Certifications, jobs, quiet victories. I learned how to live without asking permission. They never apologized. Not once. They just waited. And now, standing alone in my kitchen phone, face down, the memory settled heavy in my chest. Not pain this time, but clarity. They hadn't chosen wrong back then. They had chosen exactly who mattered. And now they wanted me to pretend it hadn't cost anything at all. I didn't become successful because I believed in myself. I became successful because failure meant going back. After I moved out of my parents' house, I lived in a studio so small I could touch the sink and the bed at the same time. The radiator knocked all night. The upstairs neighbor argued with his girlfriend at exactly 2:17 a.m., like it was scheduled. I took the first job that didn't ask questions about medical gaps. Night shift IT support. Windowless room, 6 monitors. Coffee that tasted like metal. During the day I studied. Certifications stacked one by one, security fundamentals, compliance frameworks, incident response. I learned how systems broke, how people lied, how damage hid in plain sight. Pain has a way of sharpening focus. Dialysis scars faded. Medication routines became muscle memory. I stopped thinking of my body as fragile and started treating it like something that had survived an ambush. Marjorie called every Sunday. Ben sent gas money when he knew I wouldn't ask. They never said, "You owe us." They never said anything at all. They just stayed. I kept my head down. I didn't post promotions. I didn't update LinkedIn until months later. When coworkers asked about family, I said, "They're around," and left it at that. Silence was safer. 3 years in, I moved to Charlotte for a fintech role no one back home could pronounce. Compliance analyst, mid-level, real insurance, a manager who cared more about work than backstory. I slept through the night for the first time in years. The money came slowly then, all at once. Raises, bonuses, equity. I didn't count until it vested. I upgraded apartments, bought furniture that wasn't assembled with an Allen key. I never told my parents. Not when I paid off medical debt. Not when my doctor said my labs looked boringly perfect. Not when I signed papers for my condo overlooking the city. I told Marjorie. She cried quietly on the phone and told me to buy good sheets. The only time my name slipped out into the open was a Tuesday morning incident review. A phishing attack, sophisticated, targeted, designed to look harmless until it wasn't. I caught it before it spread. The internal write-up went company-wide. My manager tagged me, someone snapped a photo from the meeting, and posted it to an internal board. My face, my name, a caption about vigilance and trust. I thought nothing of it. 48 hours later, Diane texted, "Saw your name online. Looks like you're doing well. Proud of you. No apology, no acknowledgement of the years in between. Just pride claimed retroactively like interest." I didn't reply. Then Frank emailed. Subject line, quick question. That was when I knew. They didn't show up immediately. They waited. Let the idea of my success marinate. Let curiosity turn into entitlement. A month later, the intercom buzzed. Standing in my kitchen afterwards, staring at the empty doorway, I understood something I hadn't before. They hadn't come because they missed me. They came because the math had changed. The next morning, the calls started. An aunt I hadn't spoken to since my surgery left a voicemail about family unity. A cousin asked if I was coming to the engagement party. Someone forwarded me a link to a venue website with gold lettering and too many chandeliers. I didn't respond. Diane tried again that night. "Your father is upset. He didn't expect you to react that way." I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. What way exactly alive? Frank followed up 2 days later. "You need to think long-term. This affects all of us." I blocked the number. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. They shifted tactics. Kayla emailed from an address I didn't recognize. Subject line, "Please." She wrote 5 paragraphs about stress, about expectations, about how weddings brought out the worst in people, about how she'd always looked up to me. She ended with, "I just need you in my corner." I read it twice. Then I archived it. The truth was simpler than anything she wrote. I had already stood alone when it mattered. They didn't escalate because they were desperate. They escalated because they were offended. Frank left a voicemail from a work line I hadn't blocked yet. His voice was tight controlled. "You've always been stubborn," he said. "But this crosses a line. People are starting to ask questions." There it was. Not concern. Reputation. I started locking things down. Social media private, old connections removed, address scrubbed where possible. I'd learned enough in my career to know how quickly information could be weaponized. Still, a knot formed low in my stomach. People like my parents didn't give up when they didn't get what they wanted. They applied pressure until something cracked. Friday night, as the city lights flickered on outside my windows, my phone buzzed again. A number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. Diane's voice came through thick with tears. "Rachel, honey, Kayla hasn't been sleeping. She's so embarrassed. We're running out of time." Time. The same word they'd used when they told me to wait. I deleted the message. That night I stood on my balcony with a glass of water and listened to traffic move below. No sirens, no shouting, just motion. I felt calm, not numb, clear. They could sense the money now, smell it even. Like blood in the water. What they didn't understand was this: I hadn't built my life to save them. I'd built it to never need them again. And if they thought showing up with smiles and spreadsheets would make me fold, they were about to learn how wrong they were. The shift happened overnight. 1 minute my phone was quiet. The next it was vibrating across the counter like something alive and angry. I woke up to 14 missed calls and a text preview that read, "How could you do this to your own sister?" I didn't open it. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of the city outside, and understood exactly what they'd done. They'd gone wide. The first call I answered by mistake. I was still half asleep, thumb moving on instinct. "Rachel," my Aunt Linda said, breathless. I didn't want to believe it, but Frank told me everything. Everything I asked. That you're refusing to help, that you're holding a grudge, that Kayla's in pieces. I sat up slowly. Did he mention the hospital? A pause. Just long enough. Well, she said families make mistakes, but money shouldn't come between blood. I hung up without saying goodbye. By noon, the messages were stacking. Cousins, old neighbors, people who hadn't used my name in a decade suddenly spelling it with intimacy. This isn't you. Your parents are heartbroken. God sees everything. The church was next. I hadn't stepped inside that building since my early 20s, but apparently I'd never really left. A forwarded screenshot landed in my inbox. A private prayer group post carefully worded, soaked in concern. Please pray for a family in crisis. A daughter's heart has hardened, and a sister's future hangs in the balance. We ask the Lord to soften what pride has closed. No names, no details, until someone commented, "Rachel Wynn, we're praying for you." My phone rang again. Unknown number. This time I listened to the voicemail. Diane's voice cracked on cue. "They're all talking about us." The pastor called. "Kayla's being judged. I don't know how to fix this. Fix this." I forwarded the message to a folder I'd labeled evidence and blocked the number. That afternoon, an email hit my work inbox. Anonymous. No signature. You should know the kind of person your employee really is. Attached was a screenshot of the prayer post. Another message followed seconds later. She's tearing her family apart over money. My pulse didn't spike. It slowed. They weren't asking anymore. They were threatening. I alerted HR preemptively. Compliance training had taught me one thing above all else: documentation beats outrage every time. Then I went offline for exactly 12 hours. When I came back, the damage had multiplied. Kayla had posted. Not a rant, not a plea, a photo. Her in a white dress at a fitting. Head bowed. Caption soft, trembling. Some people forget where they come from. I hope one day she remembers she's my sister. No names, no accusations. Just enough for people to fill in the blanks. The comments exploded. I watched it happen like a storm from behind glass. She's selfish. How do you abandon family like that? Money changes people. Someone found my profile, tagged me. Another person dug deeper, pulled a photo from years ago. Me, pale, thin, hospital bracelet visible. So she survived, and this is how she repays them. I closed the app. At 7:46 p.m., my doorbell rang. I didn't need to check the camera. I already knew. Kayla stood in the hallway with Trent beside her. He looked smaller in person, polished shoes, tight smile, the kind of man who believed volume equaled authority. Kayla's eyes were red. Whether from crying or rehearsing, I couldn't tell. "Can we talk?" she asked. "No," I said. She stepped forward anyway. "Please, just 5 minutes." Trent raised his phone, already recording. The red dot glowed. "We just want to understand," he said. "People are confused." I crossed my arms. "Turn that off," he smiled. "Transparency protects everyone." Kayla's voice dropped. "Do you know what they're saying about you?" I leaned closer so only she could hear me. "Do you know what they never said when I was sick?" Her jaw tightened. "You're embarrassing us," she hissed. "Do you have any idea what this is doing to my wedding?" "There it is," I said quietly. Trent angled the camera. "Rachel, viewers just want to know why you won't help your own sister." I stepped back and pressed the call button for building security. "Unit 1204, I said calmly. "I have 2 individuals refusing to leave." Kayla's face drained of color. "You wouldn't." "I already did." The guard arrived in under a minute. Big, efficient, no interest in drama. "Ma'am, sir, he said you need to leave." Trent scoffed. "This is harassment." The guard didn't blink. "So is trespassing." Kayla's eyes filled again. This time, real. "I can't believe you'd do this to me. You learned from the best I said." They left with the camera still rolling. The video went up within the hour. Edited. Cut just right. Kayla crying. Trent asking calm questions. Me standing there, arms crossed, silent. The caption read, "When your own sister won't help, and security gets called. It went everywhere. By morning, it had crossed state lines. By lunch, someone had posted my building address. By evening, my work title was trending alongside my name. I turned my phone off. When I turned it back on, HR had already handled it. My manager texted once, "We know who you are. Take the day." That night, a message slipped through from a number I hadn't blocked yet. "Frank, you've gone too far. This is out of control." I stared at the words until they blurred. Out of control. The same phrase he'd used when my labs came back bad, when the doctor said transplant. Back then, out of control meant inconvenient. Now it meant public. I typed back once. "You started this." No reply. The next morning, an envelope waited under my door. No stamp, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "Come home. We need to talk face to face, one last time." My name was written at the bottom in my mother's handwriting. I folded the paper carefully and placed it on the counter. They had tried shame, they had tried God, they had tried exposure, and now they wanted reconciliation. I poured a glass of water and stood by the window watching the city wake up. They thought I was cornered. They had no idea what I was bringing with me. I drove back to Greenville on a gray Saturday morning, the kind where the sky looks undecided. The highway was empty enough that my thoughts filled the car. Not anger, not fear, just a steady awareness that this was the last time I would make this trip for them. I parked in front of the house at 9:57 a.m. The porch light was already on. Frank opened the door before I knocked. He looked older than I remembered, smaller. Diane stood behind him, clutching a tissue like a prop she'd rehearsed with. "You came," she said, surprised. I walked past them without answering and placed my bag on the coffee table. The same table where years ago Frank had lined up numbers and decided I could wait. "Sit," I said. They did. I unzipped the bag and pulled out a thick manila folder. No drama, no flourish, just paper. A lot of it. "What is this?" Frank asked. "History," I said. "The kind you keep pretending didn't happen." I slid the first document across the table. My diagnosis, dates, lab values. The words "end-stage renal failure" highlighted in yellow. "Read it," I said. Frank skimmed, then slowed. His fingers tightened on the page. Out loud. He cleared his throat and read the prognosis. The estimated timeline without intervention. The recommendation for immediate transplant evaluation. Diane started crying before he finished. I placed the next page down. Billing statements, dialysis, surgery estimates, insurance denials, amounts circled in red, then the bank records, withdrawals, dates, labels. One line sat between them like a blade. Kayla Dance, intensive deposit. Same week, same account. $12,000. Frank's face drained of color. I didn't know it was that he started. "You knew," I said. "You did the math." I laid down the transplant paperwork next. The section about family donor testing. "There's a form here," I said, tapping it. "Consent for evaluation." It was never returned. Diane shook her head, sobbing. "We were scared." "You were busy," I corrected. Frank leaned back, eyes fixed on the table. "We thought you'd manage." I nodded once. "You thought wrong." I slid the final document forward. A notarized letter from Marjorie and Ben, the loan they took, the signatures, the dates. "They saved my life," I said. "You funded a showcase." Diane reached for my hand. I stepped back. "Don't," I said. "You don't get comfort from me." Frank finally looked up. "What do you want?" "Nothing," I said. "This isn't a negotiation." I closed the folder and held it there, palm flat on top. "This is the last conversation we're ever having. If either of you contacts me again, calls, texts, messages through other people, I will take this folder to a lawyer, not a pastor, not Facebook." "A lawyer." Frank swallowed. "You'd really do that?" "I already did," I said. "The retainers paid." Diane whispered, "We're still your parents." "No," I said. "Parents don't gamble with their child's life." I zipped the bag. From this moment on, I continued, "You don't know where I live. You don't know where I work. You don't speak my name in rooms where you want sympathy." Diane broke then. Loud, messy, real, maybe. Too late. Frank stared at the wall jaw, working like he was chewing something bitter. I walked to the door and paused with my hand on the knob. "You chose," I said, without turning around. "I just stopped pretending you didn't." I left. I didn't cry on the drive back. I didn't shake. I felt lighter than I had in years, like something lodged in my chest had finally dislodged itself. I changed my number at a rest stop. New phone, new line. The old one went silent forever. The fallout didn't reach me all at once. It trickled in through other people. A week later, Marjorie called. "You hear about the wedding I hadn't?" "It's off," she said. Trent walked, said he didn't sign up for a family that crowdsources guilt. I closed my eyes and let out a breath. 2 days after that, a former neighbor emailed. Apparently someone had forwarded my documents just a few pages to the same church group that had prayed for my hardened heart. The tone shifted overnight. The prayer requests stopped. The calls dried up. Frank's job took a hit when a client recognized his name from the video and asked uncomfortable questions. Kayla lost a sponsorship she'd been counting on. Diane stopped posting entirely. None of it came from me. That was the part that mattered. Life in Charlotte kept moving. My labs came back clean. My doctor smiled and said, "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." Work promoted me quietly. No announcement, no post. On weekends I ran along the river and felt my lungs burn in a way that meant they were working. No unknown numbers rang. No envelopes appeared at my door. One evening, as the sun dropped behind the buildings, I stood on my balcony with a glass of water and watched the lights come on one by one. Justice didn't roar. It didn't clap. It arrived quietly like sleep after a long illness. And for the first time since I was 20 years old, my life belonged entirely to me.